This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. We are in the southern side of the Czech Republic for this episode of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. We're in Česká Budějovice, and sitting with me to talk about brewing today is Adam Brož, the Šládek, or brewmaster for Budvar Brewery, and as it's known in the U.S., Czechvar brand. There's a long legal history there we won't get into with some other big, brewery owned in Northern Europe. Anyway, we won't talk about that. We're going to talk about brewing today. We're going to talk about pale lager. Well, welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Good morning. Hello to everyone.
Yeah, Adam has a reputation for being nerdy about brewing and loving to talk about technical process. And so we're going to take him up on that as we talk about pale lager, about their latest beer take on pale lager, Czech pale lager 33, and of course Tmave. And, some dark Czech lager. We're going to talk about all of those things. But first, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built, offering 24/7 service and support. G&D builds with non-proprietary parts, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. G&D's in-house engineering crew have been piping breweries, wineries, and distilleries for over 30 years. They offer free piping design and consultation with the sale of every chiller they build. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call to discuss your next project. This episode's also sponsored by the folks at BSG, who understand that the best beer starts with the best ingredients. That's why all BSG hops are hand-selected for quality by their expert staff, so you can trust you're getting the very best hops from the very best growers in the U.S. and around the world. Discover BSG's extensive range of domestic and imported hops at bsgcraftbrewing.com/hops. And scheduling freight carriers should be the last thing on a brewer's mind, so why not trust the experts to handle freight for your ingredients? Old Orchard has partnered with a leading logistics firm in the craft beverage industry to transport your flavored craft concentrate blends. When you order 2 pails or more from Old Orchard, you qualify for freight quotes. To get started, head over to oldorchard.com/brewer. So, Adam, we normally start the podcast talking about a bit of history, and I'm curious, what was your brewing history? What were those early beer experiences? Of course, growing up here, beer is just a part of life. I imagine it was something you grew up with. But where was that time where you decided, I want to become a brewmaster?
Yes, that's really so, because I was born in Budvar in České Budějovice, the city dedicated to brewing of the typical Czech lager of Budvar. And my journey is quite plain, because I always tended to study the natural sciences. So when I was studying the grammar school, I was thinking about mathematics or physics to study at the university. But getting a bit more pragmatic, I saw a jewel in my city, an excellent thing which I want to explore, the Budvar Brewery. And it was a very nice combination with the natural sciences, because the beer brewing is about the natural science. So my idea was to explore it a bit during the studies, and to try to study brewing and malting. And when I did so, it was an excellent choice.
Sure. So you came straight out of university and started working here, and have worked here ever since?
Yeah. It's a kind of a dream job, because sure. At first I wanted to study beer brewing for Budvar. And after 5 years, it was a big fortune that the previous chief of brew house was retired, and I have a I have the opportunity to overtake his job. So what was more, I started at the beginning of the process of the brewery as a chief of brew house. So it was an excellent position to start the career. What must be mentioned, there was the experience before, because the studies took 5 years at the university, and every vacations, every summertime, I had the summer job in the brewery, especially in the laboratory. And the laboratory was again the great place, because if you are checking the quality, you see all the brewery, you see everything, you meet all the people. And the love was getting into my brain.
We can definitely tell that you love what you do. But it is also interesting to see that, here in the Czech Republic, there's a very focused and a very intense educational system that produces skilled brewers that have a theoretical background, a scientific background, and it is a 4-year degree to come out to then move through this kind of, professional career. But the universities prepare brewers because there's a large industry for that here.
Yeah. We have a specialized university. It is called the University of Chemical Technology in Prague. That's the only university which is preparing the professional brewers. I have mentioned it takes 5 years of studies, and what is more, there is the possibility to study the doctorate. So not only me, but all my team, we were following with the doctorates at our alma mater university.
Wow.
And I really appreciate the education I get, because it was very easy to operate in the brewery after these studies.
Sure. So having that kind of deep theoretical knowledge and knowledge of all of the science behind what's happening helps you apply it in a practical term here.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the brewery itself. It's a historical brewery, but it's also the breweries. This brewery for this city is it's such a flagship and well known, just as in other cities here in the Czech Republic, their biggest brewery is it's as big or bigger than their biggest football team, for that matter. The loyalties are strong, and they're very important to the areas. Give us a little quick history of Budvar.
Yeah, I think if we should speak about the history, we have to start with the longest history. That's the beer brewing tradition in this city, because it's longer than 700 years.
Yeah.
And always it was about the beer in this city. Then some industrial breweries, the bigger breweries, emerged at first in the 18th, then in the 19th century.
Yeah.
And we are one of the younger breweries. Our brewery was established in 1895. If you compare this year, it's not so old in the beer brewing history of the Czech Republic.
Sure.
But what's very important, that this brewery is a follower of beer brewing tradition in this city, including all the ingredients, all the attitudes, all the recipes. That's really important. And when the first brewmaster, Mr. Hovacek, started brewing in October of 1895, it was great that he set up an excellent recipe of the Czech lager with mild bitterness, because the next brewmasters had a bit easier position to keep the great thing. But sometimes, during the time, sometimes it's not so easy job to protect the treasury, to protect the national jewels.
Sure. And we do use the term Czech lager, Czech pale lager, because, you don't make Pilsner here. They make that in Pilsen. Americans tend to think of that as a style and this all-encompassing thing. But you make Budweiser. You don't make you don't make their beer, or you make, Czech pale lager.
Yeah, the lager, it's not a boring category. You are right, it's quite wide, and Czech style or Bohemian style, sometimes if you read the categories, the definitions of the categories, sometimes there are the problems to fit the limits, because the history is not constant. It's a vivid thing, and the categories are changing. There are many influences, and in case of boudoir, it's always about the original. And if I should compare to the lager categories, it's close to the Czech style. It's partially close to Pilsner, but I think at the same distance, it is close to Munich style lager. It's mild, bitter, pale color, only pale malt used. So sometimes we are laughing that it's this beer, it's category only for one beer, one original.
That's an amazing point, and something I think that we talk about fairly often here on the podcast, that especially with American brewers and thinking about styles and these kinds of strict definitions, those styles are written to describe beers that are made commercially and try to group them.
Yeah.
But oftentimes those things that the styles point to are much more broad, and than the styles can actually capture. That's fascinating that you might think that your beer is closer to, say, Munich Helles than it is to the beer from Pilsen over there, but that is. And throughout our trip here, we've just seen there's this interesting continuity of beer where, there's no hard lines between these things. There's just the things that people in certain places like, made by their local brewers that are kind of like the ones next door, but maybe not exactly the same. And this beautiful broad range of these things, across from Franconia here all the way to Prague, common things between them, some differences, and, but summing them up as one simple term doesn't do them all justice.
Yeah. What's great that the beer is really a natural thing. There are no strict natural borders between the categories, between the geographics. It's normal that there are not strict limits. So I'm glad that you can brew an excellent beer, and which category, it doesn't depend.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about how you brew that pale lager, that original pale lager from Budvar. Before we do that, take your brewing to the next level with AccuBrew's revolutionary fermentation monitoring system, now predicting specific gravity. AccuBrew's mobile app and stainless steel sensors work together to send you live data from inside your tanks, including predicted gravity, fermentation activity, clarity, and temperature. Unlike other fermentation monitoring systems, AccuBrew is CIP ready and designed to stay out of your way, saving you time and space. Their set it and forget it solution streamlines systems and processes, helps maintain consistency, and detect problems before they ruin a batch. Join the AccuBrew community today and experience 24/7 peace of mind. Also, brewing is currently one of the most innovative, adaptive, and fast-paced industries in the world. With consumer demand shifting to the latest and greatest trend, it can be difficult for production teams to keep up with the requirements. The ProFill series of rotary can fillers from ProBrew are accelerating plant production everywhere. These can fillers run at speeds between 100 and 600 cans per minute while achieving precise and consistent filling volumes not achievable by most inline and mobile fillers. For more information, visit www.probrew.com or email contact us at probrew.com to learn exactly how they can take your operations to the next level. ProBrew, brew your beer. And did you know your water can change the flavor profile of your beer? Water is the #1 ingredient after all, and USWaterSystems.com knows just how to treat it. USWaterSystems.com has been at the forefront of the craft brewing industry and created American-made water treatment systems with brewers in mind. Whether you're a hobbyist or a pro, head on over to USWaterSystems.com to learn more, because great beer starts here. So let's talk about the original pale lager. And usually as we talk on the podcast, we try to walk through a beer in a linear process, starting with the general ingredients and design of the beer. And since we're just talking about water here, why don't we start with water? Because water is a very important thing for every beer style in every city here in the Czech Republic, and the slight differences in water start to create the foundations for the different beers that are made here.
Yeah, the water is one of the most important items, how to set up the taste profile. It sounds strange because water is not so rich in substances, in compounds creating the taste, but the composition of water is a strong factor for all the following processes. So I must say that we are very happy that our predecessors set up the brewery right here in this place of city of Budweis, because if you drill 300-meter deep well, you get the best water for the Czech lager. It sounds a bit an ideal.
Everyone has the best water where they are.
But it's really so, because if you study the literature, you definitely can't skip the information about the water hardness and the microbiological state of the water. And in case of Budweis water, it's very soft water for about 4 German degrees of hardness. And the microbiological qualities is excellent. It fulfills all the norms for drinking water, and we are checking the quality each week in our laboratory and each month at the state authorized laboratory. So the results are published, and we can be sure that the water is really the best one.
Well, and I guess it should be said that like the biggest brewing towns generally here over centuries became the biggest brewing towns because they had the best circumstances, such as water, for making those beers. When you see just how long the brewing tradition has happened here, and 1,000+ years, easily, maybe more. Things focused in those places. Žatec grows hops because hops grow best there, and then they feed it down to the cities that have the other resources that help make these things, and so things go where they're best made. And it's interesting to watch how that has led to which towns are big on the brewing scene. So from water, where do you keep building a recipe from there? And I say you inherited this recipe, obviously. This is a classic,
Yes. So you have to follow with the other ingredients.
Sure.
I think that the availability you have mentioned was the reason why the entrepreneuring, brewing the beer in the city made sense those days.
Right.
So in our case, we purchase the malt produced from the barley, which is grown only in small area in Moravia. It is called Hana in the Czech language. It's quite a small part of the small republic. It's not so comfortable. It's not in Budweis, but in comparison to the North American continent, 300 kilometers, it's not far. It's not far. The same case is the hops, because for Budweiser Original, we use only one variety, fine Zaster aroma hops. And what is more, till today, and I'm sure in future, I will insist on it, because it's really a vital pillar of the quality.
Fine Saaz hops.
Yeah. And the form. I wanted to mention the form, because it's not so clear that quite a large brewery is able to use the hop cones. We do it in 100%.
So you don't use pellets.
Yes.
You use 100% whole cone hops.
Yeah. We have only one simple reason for it, because if you want to deliver all dose of very useful compounds from hops, the cones are the only 100% dose.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I think that if you produce the pellets, for example, the pellets 90, the type 90,
Sure.
You get 90 kilos of pellets from 100 kilos of hops. In the 10 kilos which you are getting rid, there are very useful compounds, for example, the polyphenols, which are co-creating the taste profile of the beer. So it's a pity to leave them in the waste.
So, I know, as we were talking before we started the podcast, that you back up the intuition of the brewmasters with the empirical evidence of science and practice. In that sense, I imagine you have tested some pellets versus those whole cone hops. As you think about those tests from a sensory standpoint, how do they differ in flavor and aroma, from pellets to the whole cones that you use?
Yes, definitely, and it's not closed item nowadays. Quite a huge study. A 3-year study is running in our brewery, comparing different form of hops, not only pellets and pressed cones, but also pressed cones in the form of plugs.
Plugs,
if you have
right?
seen, yeah.
And something not really
Yeah.
used in the United States, but they have almost like core kind of compacted plugs that you can use in brewing.
Yeah. So we are comparing it nowadays again and again.
Yeah.
And if I answer the question of the differences in all the tests, the whole cones were always richer in the taste in the final beer, milder aroma and richer hops aroma than the other forms.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's both a quality and intensity thing, that the subtlety but the fullness at the same time creates I guess that whole cone has a way of both protecting some of those, holding in some of those things, but also expressing in a gentle way, but a more intense way. Interesting.
Yeah, there are definitely some advantages for the pellets, especially the handling, the warehousing.
Right. There's lots of advantages.
Of
to
course,
the
it's much easier and perhaps better for someone. But if we compared and waged pros and cons, the cons was the winner.
But then using those means, creating an entire, technical and process system to keep those bales in good condition, cold stored before you use them. And I mean, those are big and hefty, and they're not necessarily when they're packaged in, they're not necessarily packaged in the best way to the way that, pellets might be, capped to avoid any oxidation. How do you all store hops over the course of a season?
Yeah, we collect all the crops into the brewery because it's the only way how to really protect the quality.
Yeah.
In a special room, in a historic room of the former malt house, there is a space which is aerated up to 5 degrees centigrade, not more, without any movement of the air. So that's the way how to keep the quality.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you all have built an entire system to store your own hops then.
Yeah, it's quite expensive, demanding, but we are sure that it's worth doing it.
Sure. Let's talk about your malt again. You mentioned you use a Hana variety, Moravian barley, but there's some, connection between the brewing process that you use, the malt that you use, and how that malt, is prepared for the brew house. And a brewery your size can have malt made specifically to your specifications. You don't malt here at the brewery?
Yes. That's what we don't. The brewery had the malt house until the 80s of the last century, but with the quite steep growth of the production, it wasn't sufficient and it was impossible to intensify the plant. So the brewery decided to purchase all the malt from Moravian malt houses. It's quite a strong and good partner, a a long-term partner who is able to pick up for us the ingredients we need.
Yeah. How do you? And because you're such a large customer, you can have them make exactly what you need. Through that. Is there anything particular or special to the preparation of the malt that you use?
Yeah, there is. That's the reason why we need the strong partner, because our malt we purchase, it's not the I will call it normal malt or common malt.
It's not what you order just out of the catalog.
Because it's special, especially in the degree of modification. For our process, the lower modified malt is suitable. And if you want to keep all the quality parameters, it's not only about the analytical specs, but also about the varieties. So our specifications are analytical ones for about 15 items. But what is more, we want to get only Czech varieties of barley. So we are very strict, but it works for decades.
Do they grow non-Czech barley varieties here in Czech?
These days there are for about 3 the purely Czech varieties, and then there are many other foreign varieties connected with the higher modified malts but for really different brewing process. I will have to mention the brewing process because it's unique
We'll definitely talk about that brewing process. But I guess you're right. I guess that malt house could also source barley grown in neighboring countries that might not, that also grow brewing barley, and it might be a different approach on that. Is everything that you make Czech grown, or is some of that also grown from Czech varieties in surrounding areas?
In our case, it's really the Czech grown ones, and what's more, only from a specific area. It's closely connected to the PGI, protected geographical indication. It's strictly written there which area is allowed and which not. It was made deliberately from the brewery because we wanted to be transparent, and we want to protect this heritage for the next generation as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And so, and that barley process, and it feeds into your brewing process. You under-modify that malt so that it can feed into a double decoction process, as you brew. Since we've talked about those ingredients, let's start talking about some of that process.
In our brew house, which is a typical brew house, if you open the old books of beer brewing in the Czech Republic, you can read a process which is very similar to Budvar production, because we use the two-mesh decoction, and if I should emphasize some items which are really necessary to keep, that will be the double decoction for Budvar. To speak about decoction generally, the decoction is the item which is able to make the lager, and the particular solution, which kind of decoction, shows on the final taste profile. So last time when I was in Canada and in the US, I've seen that many brewers are trying to brew lager, and I have to say that many of the lagers were excellent beers. Sometimes they were closer to the Czech ones, sometimes not.
Sure.
But what's my recommendation? I know that it's not the technically easiest way, the decoction. It's sometimes it's not possible on the equipment because it's not equipped for the decoction.
Right.
But if you are trying a lager, try to do decoction. Despite all of these difficulties, don't give up.
Now, you mentioned before we started talking here on the podcast that decoction, obviously we understand, and we can actually talk about how it impacts the flavor of the beer itself. But one of the things you mentioned is that the decoction process actually helps you even out some of the variances in malt itself.
Yeah. The decoction and the brewing process, the entire brewing process is a very wise invention of the human beings, because the wisdom comes from the possibility that if you are working with the living stuff from beginning till the end, and it's true because at the beginning there is the barley and hops on fields, then the yeast, then the people, and at the end the people again, because the human being is a judge of your job if it is done properly or not. So what's very wise, it's a kind of buffer. How to say it? The process could buffer the variances which are coming from nature. Each crop is different, and in experimental way, in empirical way, was set up decoction to buffer these differences. So we confirmed it in the scientific way in the experiments. That to react to different crops, it's not the proper way to change the meshing scheme. For example, if you keep the same double decoction, you can be sure that from the slight variances from crops to crops, the decoction solves this problem in the standard quality, following with the standard quality of the beer.
Interesting. So even if some of the number specs change a little bit here and there, that decoction process will even that out in the long run. And rather hadn't thought about it in those terms. From a kind of flavor profile, and again, I know you've tested this. Decoction works in an interesting way because it both locks in a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of residual sweetness in a fine way. It's something, creates some unfermentable element that these beers really depend on, and that help complement the hop flavor and the bitterness in the beer. But while at the same time also aiding fermentation of the rest and creating that kind of texture that we need out of these beers. Talk to me, as you think about the comparisons of decoction versus non-decocted pale lager. How would you describe the differences?
I think that there are two main differences. One, the physical one, because in case of decoction, you are boiling the meshes, and during the boil, the flavor active compounds and the color active compounds are generated, and the beer is richer in flavor, in color. It's very similar to cooking the meal. If you are cooking the meal, it's necessary to heat it up. It's necessary to keep some time to
toasted bread tastes way better than just plain bread.
And you need the energy and the time to let these reactions to be taken. And the second thing, that's the composition of long and short molecules in the scientific point of view, especially in the sugars, because in case of decoction, you tune up automatically by nature the composition of fermentable and non-fermentable sugars, and the main difference between final beer is the breadiness, the body of the beer. We have made many experiments, not only on lager, with decoction and non-decoction in small scale at the university, and there was an obvious difference with the breadiness, with the body of the beer.
Sure. Well, what does your decoction process look like? I've talked to many brewers, and some have long decoctions, some have short decoctions. What is your goal through that decoction, and how do those decoction steps work for Budweiser?
I will describe it in the technical way, so shortly to think about as the inspiration, and you can add your experience. Our recipe starts at meshing in temperature 38 degrees centigrade. So very low. In many breweries, you can't see such a temperature in meshing kettles. So then hot water is added up to 50 degrees centigrade. And after that, a first mash is divided from the brew. The first mash, approximately a third of all the volume, is heated up to 65 and then 75. After that, boiled for 20 minutes, collected together with the rest of the brew, and the process is repeated again. So 2 mash decoction with these temperatures, no hurry. Together it takes for about 4 hours, but it's worth doing it because you really tune up the taste in natural way. You don't need to push the beer to the proper position in the taste. It works automatically. It works naturally. That's the wisdom of the brewing.
Sure, and it works naturally with this whole step mashing process. And it's finally integrated. And you're right. Everyone here spends a lot of time in their mash, much more than single infusion mashes typically in the United States. But certainly the beers are fantastic. I want to keep following through this brewing process. Before we do that, hear that. That's the sound of your beer out in the world, hanging out at parties, going on adventures, meeting new people. It's carbonated to perfection, and the can art looks slick. Twin Monkeys Beverage Systems knows how to capture quality in a can. Their custom-built canning lines combine high quality with affordability so that people can get a taste of your tap room from any room. Visit twinmonkeys.net today and learn just how easy it is to get your craft into cans. Also, everybody knows that yeast plays one of the most important roles in brewing, no matter what style and recipe you choose. It influences flavor, aroma, acidity, brightness, and mouthfeel all at the same time. And brewing a lager is no exception. Discover a whole soft lager range by Fermentis, covering from traditional to modern style lagers. Soft Lager S189 for the elegant lagers with floral notes, Soft Lager S23 for fruity and hoppy ones, and Soft Lager 3470, W3470 for your neutral beers. Available in 500 grams, 100 grams, and 11.5 gram formats. Want to know more about soft lager yeasts? Visit www.fermentis.com. And ABS Commercial has been a full-service brewery outfitter for over 10 years. They're proud to offer brew houses, tanks, keg washers, and small parts to brewers across the country, as well as equipment for distilling, cider making, wine making, and more. They know the ins and outs of the brewing and installation process and can design the perfect setup for you, whether you're just starting out or looking to expand. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized brewery needs. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. So from the mashing process, let's keep walking through the brew. How does the original Budvar, where does the brew day go from there?
From the mashing to the end, there is approximately 100 days of effort of 100 people. So it's quite difficult thing to finalize the beer, but the other parts are easier in the process because after mashing, you need to keep the wort boiling.
Sure.
We have spoken about the hops, so it's obvious that you have to add.
How do you add whole cone hops into a brew this size and this kind of scale?
In the case of Budvar, it's done manually for 3 times into the brew. The first moment is when the bottom of kettle is covered, then when there is full kettle, and the last dose is 30 minutes after 90 minutes of boil. So
you had basically a whirlpool edition of some sort there.
No, only brew house.
30 minutes before they
30 minutes before, but into the kettle, because 30 minutes is quite a long time. The only reason is that the form of natural cones needs the time to be spread into the volume.
Oh, okay.
That's the reason. So after approximately,
so there's nothing too late because you're using whole cones, you would not get the right flavor and aroma extraction from that.
Yeah. So after for approximately 10 hours in brew house, it goes into the whirlpool. There is nothing special. Cooled down to 7 degrees centigrade, and the yeast is added. I think that's the the very important item. We have been using the same yeast strain since the beginning of this brewery. So this strain is specific in its metabolism. It is able to ferment deeper. It's one of the reasons
Highly attenuative,
why we have the attenuation deeper with 5 ABV in the final beer. Then after the cooling, after the wort is being cooled down, there is a main fermentation nowadays in modern cylinder conical vessels. What is traditional, that's the temperature and the time, because it doesn't exceed 11 degrees centigrade, and the time is from 11 to 12 days. So that's the same figure you can find out in the old books.
Sure.
That was one very deeply studied item when we switched from the open vessels to the cylinder conical tanks.
And when did you switched from open fermenters?
Completely, it was done in 1996.
So not that long ago.
Yeah, but there was for about 5 years period before when we run in parallel the open vessels and the cylinder conical tanks to be sure that the beer is the same and the recipe fits together.
It took you 5 years to decide.
Yeah. Very properly.
That the cylindro-conical fermenters were going to be good enough.
To be confirmed and verified.
And then I imagine maybe some blending back and forth just to make sure everything's squared up. Sure. And then from those cylindro-conicals, you move into horizontal lagering tanks.
That's the next step, because we use the cylinder conical tanks only for main fermentation. So it means that keeping two-phase fermentation, the young beer goes into the horizontal tanks. There are different types of the tanks. A part of the lager cellar was installed in the 50s and 60s of the last century. They are the iron tanks with the epoxide inside, quite small ones, 200 hectoliters each. But the next part of the lager cellar, they are huge horizontal tanks, 10 times bigger. It means that the smallest of them is 2,000 hectoliters, and they serve for a very long maturation. I think that that's the last pillar of the lager, the maturation. It depends on the taste profile, but in case of boudoir, where there is only pale malt and very fine hopping, you need the long maturation period. In this case, up to 3 months in the cellar.
And you mentioned, as we were touring around a little bit before, that the hydrostatic pressure in cylinder conicals just makes it unsuitable for lagering, because you're doing this and you're keeping it cold, and there's, it's trying to do very small things, and doing that under that kind of pressure is too much. But I also imagine you've tested that.
Yeah, of course, because because you have no problem if you lager the beer up to 30 days in the cylinder conical vessel. The duration and the exposition of the pressure to the yeast is necessary to judge. So up to 30, it would be okay. But in case of long maturation, the horizontal ones are better.
And what is the difference then in a sensory perspective between 30 days and 90 days of lagering? Because 12 weeks of lagering is a long time.
Yeah, it is. In case of boudoir, you can recognize especially the smoothness. If you test the 30 days boudoir from the cellar, the smoothness is not sufficient. This taste profile of the beer is very strict. there is no chance to mask anything. You can't mask it by pale malt. You can't mask it by the fine Aromasacer. In case of rougher beers, or if you use different malts, you have the chance to mask the slight of taste. In case of Budvar, it's impossible. So that's the reason why we really need longer maturation.
One thing that is not a significant component in your take on Czech pale lager that we do see in a lot of others is a small diacetyl component.
It was always written in the Czech or Pilsner characteristics. In case of Budvar, there is really no diacetyl because you have time enough to get rid of diacetyl in the natural way. So sometimes when we discuss the categories, we are not typical because we have no diacetyl. But I always claim that diacetyl, it's not the desirable compound in lager because it's much disturbing the taste profile.
The debate continues. It will continue to rage on. No, it obviously, brewers brewing at all of these scales have the ability to brew them however they would like to brew them, and they're not. It's not an accident when it's in in some of the larger lager beers. But it was interesting to taste. Yours is definitely a different take on that compared to others that I've been tasting over the last week or two here in the Czech Republic. Well, let's talk about stepping it up. You all somewhat recently launched a new iteration of from Budvar 33, which is more IBUs. The 33 represents the IBU number, and I think it's interesting that you would tie the brand so tightly into an IBU number that even within the common populace of beer drinkers, that idea of bitterness and being a little more bitter is something that everyone can understand on a conceptual level. But that 33 is a even maybe a more full approach. The original Budvar, is a very it's a little bit lighter, clean, right? A little more like a Munich Helles, where the 33 is maybe a little more of a bigger, fuller Czech style, or not even Czech. I'm so used to saying Czech style, but it's actually just a Czech lager. Yeah. Talk to me about developing a 33.
There was a vivid discussion about. There was always a vivid discussion about the bitterness of Budvar, and someone was not able to appreciate the medium level but mild bitterness. It was always described as a sweet beer and so on. So the discussion continued in our team. And
imagine consumers saying that they just wanted a more bitter beer.
Yeah, and I think that
the Czech Republic is fantastic from that perspective.
They were always discussing the different kinds of bitterness, so that was a kind of challenge to try the beer. For someone, it was shocking. The bitter Budvar, what's it? It's strange, but I must say that it was not easy to produce bitter Budvar. Perhaps it's quite easy to produce a bitter beer. You get a bitter hops, you mix it together, and you have really bitter stuff. But the differences in bitterness that they are huge, and it took.
But you have to make it drinkable, right?
Yeah, and it took a year. It took a year to adjust the recipe. In our case, to pick up the best or the most suitable hops and combine it with the body of the beer. What's interesting, next to the pale malt, there is a slight dose of Crystal Light, a special malt, which is not the typical caramel because we don't prefer the caramelized malt in lager. And when we combined the Agnus variety, which is more bitter, but I think that the bitterness is very noble from Agnus variety grown in Sacer area. We combined it with this body. It was excellent beer for us, so we wanted to share it.
The Agnes hop has been one that we've been really excited about.
Yeah.
And it's fun to hear you mention that because it's something that has stood out for us over the last couple of days of tasting beers and rubbing hops. And it'll be interesting to see how, as people, spread. Well, but for you, like, how does Agnes in this bigger body beer, hold up to that more intense, flavor?
Yeah, we needed some hops, which gives the bitterness, but doesn't break the drinkability. That was the reason why Agnus, because it's more intensity, higher intensity in bitterness, but very rich aroma and harmonic with the body. That was quite easy way.
Yeah. And does it use the same yeast and fermentation? Yeah, I mean, because you're using a highly attenuative yeast. And so it's while you're building more body into this, but it's still finishing dry.
Yes, it's possible because you can combine the malts with different final degree of attenuation, and if you mix it, you can a bit lower the final attenuation.
Does anything change in terms of how long that it is lagered?
It's not so long lagered. Approximately 50 days in lager cellar are enough because of the different taste profile.
Because it's just a heftier, a bigger beer.
Yeah.
Are there any other big changes in that? I mean, a little bit of light crystal malt, but it's still the same kind of Pilsner or pale Czech malt. It's funny because we call it Pilsner malt, but it's really just Czech pale malt.
Yeah.
We have our own pale malt. Anyway.
It's only the terminology. I think that the most important is the taste in the glass.
Sure. Are there any other concerns that you as you're thinking about this beer that you focused on in terms of making sure that it retained its drinkability?
Yeah. The drinkability is obligatory for us. We want never to produce not drinkable beer, because the drinkability it's a part of the final product. I think that our product is not the beer, but the joy from the beer.
Sure.
And without the drinkability, it's a half of a joy.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly talk about Tmave. Yeah, that's another one that you as a large brewery, are making a dark Czech lager, and it's it's commonly available out here. Talk to me about your approach to Tmave and what you think defines a Czech dark lager.
Yeah, I love the story because it was in 2004 when this product was invented in Budvar. In the longer history, there were some dark beers from Budvar, but none of them was produced in long term. So in 2004, the Czech market with dark beers, or mostly dark lagers, was the market with all the sweet lagers. The dark ones were all sweet, very full, but unpleasantly sweet in my opinion. So we discussed in the brewery about the dark possibility, and there were two opinion branches in the brewery. One of them wanted to follow the Czech market with the sweet one. The second one wanted to have more roasted, more aromatic beer, but the dry one. So it was really difficult to persuade our boss that it must be dry and not sweet and without any additions, ingredients different from a malt. But we made some experiments in the small scale and presented to him how the beer looks like, and it was very drinkable, very, very good. So our boss allowed to brew the first production brew, but he shortened the dose of roasted malt for half. So we were disappointed because it's not complete. In the illegal way, we put the full dose into the beer. After, I think, 15 years after, we told to the former boss that we cheated. But everyone was satisfied because the beer was appreciated, not only by them. Not only by him, but by the people around.
Sometimes you should trust your brewers because your brewers know what they're doing there. How do you build that kind of, color and body without, without, because you're not making a stout per se, you're making a Czech dark lager that should have this color and heft, but also, maybe not that kind of, very dark intensity that, you might expect from a stout.
Yeah, it's a very easy story, and the same philosophy. We use the nature for it, so it means that the composition of 4 different malts creates the taste and the color. The body creates the pale Czech malt, the same like in the pale lager.
Yeah.
Then the Bavarian malt, the Munich malt. Is a part which gives the tones of the body. Then the caramelized malt produced by higher temperatures with specific taste, and the color, the dark color, gives the roasted malt. That was the cheated item we doubled.
Sure. And I imagine it's still mostly base malt with smaller amounts of these other things in there. Sure. Is there any key? How does it differ in its mash process or?
No. It's very similar, mostly identical with the pale lager.
Mm-hmm. And then hops. How do you use hops in the dark lager?
That's the same. That's 100% of Zasterfein Armagnac.
Well,
in cones.
There you go. In cones, of course. Well, we're getting on in time here and need to wrap this up. There's a long history of this brewery. What are you looking forward to in the future, and what are some of the biggest hopes and concerns that you have for brewing here in the Czech Republic in the next 5 years?
Yeah, there are different parts of the future. One of them is the protection of the history.
Yeah.
So it means to protect the great lagers. Then to develop new beers. I think that it's not the end of the portfolio, and we are in the laboratory scale testing different interesting things, because I've told you that the lager is not boring category. So we can be curious to see new discoveries in case of lagers, and be sure that we will test it properly to be drinkable. So that's the second part. And the third one, it's the playful beer scene of craft breweries. It was impossible not to cooperate with them, because we are cooperating with the Czech ones as well, with some small breweries abroad, and in cooperation with them you open the very wide scale what to try in experiments, and sometimes from the experiments emerges great beers. So I'm looking forward to the future.
You keep continuing to try and continuing to experiment and continuing to stay open to new things. That's fantastic, and a beautiful place to be for a brewery with so much history. And I think that's a great place to bring this to a close. G&D Chillers has set the standard on quality, service, and reliability with 24/7 service and support. BSG hops are hand-selected for quality by their expert staff. Try Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends in your next craft beverage. Join the AccuBrew community and experience 24/7 peace of mind. ProBrew's rotary can fillers reduce waste and produce higher quality packaged beer. Water is your number one ingredient, and USWaterSystems.com knows just how to treat it. Twin Monkeys offers customizable packaging solutions for every craft. Discover the whole soft lager range by Fermentis, and ABS Commercial is your full-service brewery outfitter. Of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast and any others, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, and let us know that it matters to you. Adam Broch, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. If people want to learn more about Budvar, or Czech-var in the United States, where would you say that they should go look for more information on what you do?
I think that the best information is to go through the brewery personally. That's the best experience, better than all our speeches and the information given by different materials. So I think the best recommendation is come to us. And if you are a brewer or a beer geek, try to contact us. Our team is loving to share the joy from the beer.
Well, we appreciate you sharing with us here. Cheers.
Thank you a lot. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.